and basketball analysis with over 70 years combined experience.
The Bob Ryan and Jeff Goodman podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time.
Time for the Bob Ryan, Gary Tanguay pod here on CLNS Media. We are brought to you by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. Pick more, pick less with Prize Picks. Bob, Bill Simmons, who is a huge Celtic fan, and we all know has done great things in the media, is going to be coming out with a Celtics documentary in 2025. So I thought this would be a good opportunity for me to just like pick your brain and kind of let's talk about the Celtics big picture, especially since they're on the doorstep of defending another championship and what they mean to sports. But let's start with the toughest question. What do the Boston Celtics mean to the world of sports?
I think they represent the NBA to a lot of people historically. I think clearly the two franchises that stand apart are the Celtics and the Lakers.
Right.
And there was a period of time, I think, before the Lakers, and the aftermath of the Russell era when they won the 11 and the 13 years, and the original Laker dynasty of Minneapolis had kind of starting to recede a bit in memory. And that went from roughly 1949 until 1954. The two most famous basketball aggregations in the world, one, the Harlem Globetrotters, and two, the Boston Celtics. At that point in America in the 20th century. And I think the Celtics still remain in the forefront. But we have to admit that the 21st century and the last, the Celtics have won twice now since '86.
Right.
The Lakers have won far more often, and for the generation of people growing up in that time, they probably associate the Lakers more than any other team, and I understand that. But I still think it's the Celtics and the Lakers in whatever order you want that represent basketball, to people worldwide, and now the Celtics can make a claim about worldwide because of the travels that Red Auerbach and they did, and some of his stars did at the behest of the State Department, among other things, back in the 50s and 60s.
Yes, discuss that, Bob. Talk about that, because we've heard about those stories, like when he played the trick on Tommy Heinsohn. I can't. Was he in Germany or France, whatever?
Right.
He had Tommy arrested or something.
Yeah, right. I forget the exact story, but they played prank on Tommy in a foreign country in Europe. I forget which one at the time.
But talk about how like when you talk about the Globetrotters, that's what they did. But the Celtics did the same thing. I mean, just enlighten people on that, because I don't.
Well, I mean, they were sent on exhibition tours to Europe, I believe. I don't know about South America, but Europe, and on some occasions during the 50s and 60s, and so people knew who they were, and Red was known, and Russell was known, and Cousy, was known. So definitely. They were the only team. There was nobody else that was getting that honor. But then again, they had earned that honor because of how they dominated basketball for those 13 years of the Russell era. I mean, 11 championships in the 12th, which had he not been hurt, they would have won as well. And I mean, I'm sorry, but it's true. They got beat legitimately once in 13 years. And if you knew basketball at all outside America, it was going to be either the Globetrotters, who truly were Globetrotters, or the Celtics.
Yeah, the story's coming back to me now because as Tommy told it, I think they were in France or Italy, and Red set it up that Tommy was arrested, and because he was German, and the cop or something said German, pointed at Tommy, and they held him for like 4 hours or something. Then the Red kid, then he busted his chops, and they had a
right.
Then I think Tommy got back at him when he gave Red an exploding cigar or something like that. Needless to say, but I was thinking about this. Correct me if I'm wrong. I guess you could go back to Jesse Owens. Would probably be the first athlete where race and culture, politics, because of the Olympics, and of course Hitler. And then and possibly I'm missing some other examples of that.
Well, I mean,
Russell and the Celtics in the 60s, culturally, that was pretty important.
yeah, there was. I mean, they represented the NBA to the world. There's no doubt about it. I mean, remember, it was when Russell started winning championships, there was an 8-team league. By the time he won his 11th, it was a 14-team league.
Right.
But it was just an 8 and 9-team league in the late 50s, early 60s. Yeah, they were just synonymous. You know, if you knew anything about the NBA, it was about the Celtics, and it was no question. The other guy, I guess you have to throw in there was Joe Louis. So, you know,
Right.
Joe Louis, he won the championship in 37. He beat James Braddock and reigned until 1949. You know, and no one's ever had a reign like that in heavyweight ranks or any. I don't even know about any other ranks. But he was famous, so. But you're right, Jesse Owens, because of the 36 Olympics.
I don't think. I mean, did anybody? I mean, I don't know if anybody in the media really knew Bill Russell. But like you certainly were around him more than I was. And I interviewed him once and had a couple of small conversations. I don't think I've met anyone like him in the world of sports, where a man that marched with Martin Luther King, just the way he carried himself, the racism he had to deal with, combined with the success that he had on the floor. I mean, that's the thing that's amazing about Russell in the 60s. We all know about the racism he was victimized by in the 60s. It didn't affect his game.
Oh, not in the least.
At all.
Ever in the least. He separated them completely. But when he walked out of that gym back into the real world, it was a different, circumstance. And he didn't let things overwhelm him ever. You know, the great line I always remember from him, and I've heard it, and I didn't read it. I got this from his own lips, and not that it's exclusive, but I can say that I wasn't just something that I read. It's something that he did say to me. And he said, "My citizenship is not a gift. My citizenship is a birthright."
Right.
And he lived his life along, with that as a credo, and among other things. But that certainly
was he the first athlete? Obviously, Cassius Clay, the Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
Probably after him, but was he the first athlete that took that type of stance or along those lines?
Yeah, it's hard to say. Jackie Robinson, of course, had a central role in all this, of course, and because having broken the color line in baseball was the number one sport in America.
Right.
Without unquestioned, and team sport in the first 60, 70 years of the 20th century. So, yeah, and what Jackie Robinson did was what the Dodgers did with Jackie Robinson was extremely important. And Jackie himself had to, he was cautious. He was picked by Branch Rickey because of his ability to absorb the verbal contact, if you will. He wanted somebody that could turn the other cheek and proceed. Russell wasn't real good at turning the other cheek, kind of thing, and that's fine. But they're all distinct individuals with this distinct contributions and distinct reactions to the circumstances. For example, even on the Dodgers themselves, Robinson and Roy Campanella had conflict at times because Robinson thought Roy was a little too passive. I won't go so far as to say he called him an Uncle Tom, but he thought he was too nice about and too forgiving about things at times. And Robinson, remember Robinson in the Army, he walked to the front of the bus or whatever the hell he was court-martialed. And the Army and the segregated United States Army in World War II. Wow. I mean, he was forthright, absolutely. But within that, he knew that when he was going to be presented to the world as a Brooklyn Dodger, that there was going to be a lot of nasty stuff, and he wasn't going to be able to pick up and fight everyone all the way back. He had to ignore it and had to proceed. So he was chosen not because he was the best player. He was chosen because he was the best person to have this to have this an awesome responsibility of being the guy to break the color line in Major League Baseball.
Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. They got over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all, so you just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up 100 times your cash. Your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get into the action in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so your lineups stay even if one of your players gets hurt or injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup live. Sign up today and give $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus because it's guaranteed. Think Steph Curry will get more than 4 3-pointers this week, or Anthony Edwards more than 27 points? Cook up some hot takes with your friends and win real money this basketball season. Get your crew to run your game on Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. And, you know, some of the Prize Picks you could be looking at: Luka Doncic for more than 31.5 points, Steph Curry for more than 4 3-pointers, Anthony Davis more than 11 boards, the freak Giannis for more than 29.5 points. Again, download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. You know, as I was reflecting on, and I'm sure, you know, Simmons is going to do a great job covering it in this documentary, because it said in the press release they're going to talk about the cultural and off the floor things as well, and what the team meant to the city. And I just look at Russell and I go, I think he's an amazing individual. I just think he's a marvelous man, an amazing individual. I've never met anybody or seen anybody like him. So what else about that? And I want to move on and get to the other decades here. But was there anything else about that 60s team that that you were enamored with?
Well, first of all, I rooted against them all the way.
Because you were from Philly.
Growing up in the greater Philadelphia area, if you will, in Trenton, New Jersey, 40 miles from William Penn's statue. So I did not root for the Boston Celtics. I wanted to beat them. As a matter of fact, in 1967, I was, let's see, that 66, 67 would have been my junior year at BC. And they played the famous Eastern Conference Finals, in which the 76ers beat them in the 5th game, 140-116. And Wally Jones went 8 for 9 in the 3rd quarter. I recorded the Johnny Most broadcast on my reel-to-reel tape recorder, so I would have it. I was an enjoyment to listen back again as they kicked the ass of the Celtics. So I was not a Celtic fan in those eras. The first time I ever pulled for them was in the 69 finals. Now, at that point, I had become, I was working at the Globe. And I never dreamed that in those finals I would be covering them the next 5 months later. That was never part of the plan. That was just fell out of the sky. But that the first time I ever pulled for them was against the Lakers in '69. So anyway, you were frustrated. Russell frustrated the entire NBA for 13 years, and you talked to Jerry West, and who got beat 6 times in the '60s by the Celtics and the Russell, and if he could have played with Russell, he would have had 6 rings, and he knew that's the way he felt. I mean, he was right. I think so. I wanted to beat them, and I wasn't rooting for them at all.
Do you still have the reel to reel?
No, I wish I had. I wish I had some stuff that my God, I'd love to, but no, I don't, and that's all gone.
All right, let's move to the 70s now, Bob. And that's when you are in full swing.
Yes.
Bob Ryan and the Celtics are joined at the hip, and to me, that is kind of the forgotten decade for the Celts. I always feel that 74 and 76 team, which is when I fell in love with basketball, when I loved JoJo White and John Havlicek and Don Chaney and Cowens and so forth. Those are the teams that I grew up with. But I always feel like that's the forgotten decade, unfortunately.
There's times going on that's exactly right, because what happened was we had the ultimate glamour of the big three and the Bird, McHale, Parrish era, and that there was more media attention. There was more. It was the better way of following, more ways to follow the team. To get the gospel out than there were in the '70s. And there's no question about that. That the '70s have been forgotten. Extremely important to me because I was very personally attached to that team. I was involved, and socially in a way that you don't do today, and no one does today. And so it was more to just it was a lifestyle for me. It wasn't just a job, without any question. And it was very important. I got to know those guys very well, and I knew all their wives' names and the kids' names, and the whole thing, and what car they drove, and really, it was a different world. But anyway, on the court, that team ran. There's nothing like it today. There's nobody that runs the way they ran anymore. With the organized fast break, with the outlet pass and the wings filling and the trailer. I can still see Don Nelson ambling down the court and then getting the pit pass out the foul line, sitting that 15-footer. Cowens used to make that shot too, and nobody plays like that anymore. They play, so it's different. And but and the individuals, of course, Havlicek was in his prime, and absolutely the best. I mean, this is what categorically he was the best basketball player in the world from roughly 1969 to '74. Exclusive of center. The game was different then. You had to differentiate. Right. When you're talking about the center. You realize there was a 20-year period when the most valuable player in the National Basketball Association was a center. And Oscar Robertson was the only one year that broke out that string. 20 years in a row, it was a center. And that's the way the game was played. Today, what's a center? You got right. Big. You got generic bigs. And that's fine. That's the way the game is. That's okay. But Havlicek was the best all-around player in the world. Offense, defense, clutch, everything. And not to mention leading the league in minutes played 3 or 4 times and never, the other, he was the best player. Well, it didn't take people don't know this now. As a matter of fact, we have this new ranking book, David Aldridge and John Hollander. I think it's John Hollander, but John's rank is 29 in the all-time list. And that's, the rest of the list isn't too bad, by the way. I give they got certain things very good. They got him right, but they blew it on John Havlicek. He's 29. Are you kidding me? I mean, that's a joke. He's in the top 10 to 15. That's where he is, and that's where he should be. And anyway, but you're right. That team doesn't get the credit that it deserved. But what
did they mean to the city then, Bob?
Well, it was interesting. Because you remember when the Celtics were the Celtics of the Russell era, they were famously didn't sell out except during the playoffs and maybe when they were playing the 76ers or whatever team Wilt was on. Because remember, he was a Philadelphia Warrior, he was a San Francisco Warrior, and then he was a 76er. Okay, right. He was a Laker. And right. All in this decade of the 60s, okay? So he showed up, people showed up, they wanted Russell and Wilt, But they didn't, they were averaging 8, 9, and of course, famously the Bruins in that dreadful 60s era when they were finishing last, the Rangers and the Bruins were finishing 5th and 6th in the 6-team league every year. And they were selling out because it was a hockey town. They were a cult, almost a cult thing. And, but it changed. And this is where you have to wonder about the racism. You cannot deny it. Dave Cowens shows up and, there's a difference in the crowds and in the numbers and the reaction and everything else. I think you can't deny it that Dave Cowens being white. If Dave Cowens had the same skill set, the exact same skill set and aggression, he was the same person, but he happened to be African American. I don't think he would have been, the thing would have taken off the way it did. But now there's gradually, first it's averaging 10,000 a game, which I remember once saying that, Gary, believe it or not. Oh boy, if they could only average 10,000 a game, we'd know. Wow. And you'd have this garden situation where the afternoon and the Celtics would play before 7,000 or 8,000 against whomever, kick their ass. And then they make the Bull Gang would come out, change the floor, the Bruins come in, and the 13,909.
Right.
That's the famous number, that, and that was a famous phrase all around Boston. People would say, I went somewhere, it was 13,909. This one I'm not making up. So it would say, I went to the 8 o'clock mass. It was 13,909. As opposed
That's amazing. I never heard that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. People routinely say that. Joe Looney, who was a wonderful gentleman who covered for the Boston Herald Traveler, and he was his license plate, his vanity plate was 13909.
Amazing.
That's the magic figure, 13909. Anybody from that era knows it very well.
I love it.
There's nothing like seeing a game live. I mean, watching it on TV is great. We have all the technology. We have our phones. We have access to everything. But being there in person, it's definitely the way to go. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time.
And then, of course, the other thing was the great thing that separated them from a little bit, that gave them an extra cachet, that gave them a resonance, an identification. Johnny Most. Johnny Most was extremely important and a central part of the whole thing. His rather unique style, not to mention his rather unique voice, which would never get hired today, as you well know. But Johnny Most was a very important part of spreading the gospel and what it meant what the Celtics represented. And I would dare say we've had some wonderful announcers, of course, with Bob Wilson and of course in all the baseball, man, Ken Coleman and all that, and right down to our great guy Joe Castig today. And we've had all kinds, Gil Santos, blah blah blah. But in the history of Boston sports broadcasting, there's never been anybody as singular and as special as Johnny.
Because Johnny was a personality.
Oh my God!
You know, and this is what has happened, in my opinion, and this is why I don't think. And again, the guys are great. I mean, Tirico's a gentleman and a wonderful guy. Al Michaels is phenomenal, but when you're doing a national game, it's much different. I understand that, but Johnny wasn't accurate, but people don't care.
Well, in the beginning, here's my theory. This is Bob Ryan's theory. It's not gospel, although I like to think so, but I'll be honest, it's just my theory. And when I first started listening to Johnny Most, I came here not knowing nothing about him, out of New Jersey in 1964. Here it was. He was he called a straight game very well, except that he embellished it with his partisanship. But I mean, the actual what was happening, the passes, the kind of shot that was taken, the trend. He was very accurate, but he embellished it in a way that I had never liked this, and it was all good guys, and it was all. But it was occasionally
good versus evil, Bob. Good versus evil.
Occasionally, it would be some credit. Anyway, but it changed when Cowan showed up. That team, that's when it became good guys, bad guys more than ever. If you listen to a standard generic broadcast of Johnny Most, say 1957, 59, 60, 62, 3, as opposed to a generic Johnny Most broadcast, 72, 74, 75, right up through the Bird and Parrish and McHale era, is a difference. And it was total. The older we got and the more we got entrenched with it, it was all good guys and bad guys, and white hats and black hats, and I don't think in the 55 he would have said that anybody was crawling out of the sword like Kurt Rambis, but or the McFilthy and McNasty, the pairings.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, by the way, I want a flash across my head. While this was going on at time, and a very similar thing was happening in LA with regard to an announcer becoming completely synonymous with the franchise. A totally different kind of announcer, Chick Hearn. But people grew up, he introduced pro basketball to Southern California in 1960 when they moved from Minneapolis. And he became, and he had held the job for over 30 years. Very different kind of broadcaster. But the point is that he was identified completely, team as Johnny Most was here. And they were friendly, but you couldn't have been more separate in, Chick Hearn style of broadcasting and Johnny Most style of broadcasting. But they both were synonymous with their team.
I'm putting you on the spot, and I need to Google it. What was the term that Chick came up with?
Well, airball, for one. He invented the phrase airball.
Airball.
And dribble drive, but the airball, I think it's
airball.
universally known in basketball.
Oh my God, yeah, absolutely.
It's Chick Hearn, and yeah, give him credit for that, among other things.
Bob, as we go to well, let's move on to the '80s then, and to the Celtics in the city. The '80s for me, and being in college and so forth, and I also think it was the pinnacle of the Globe sports department. I think the '80s, that's when you guys were the Beatles, and I think it coincided with the fact that the Red Sox were in the World Series, the Patriots got to a Super Bowl, obviously the Celtics. But what was it like for the Bird era off the floor for the city?
Really important. That's when they gained parity finally with the Bruins with hockey. That '70s team, never did. And of course, remember, they were '70s team were up against the big bad Bruins. They're up against Orr and Esposito and that whole bunch and Turk Sanderson and Jerry Cheevers and Kenny Hodge, etc. And they won twice, and famously lost in '71 when Ken Dryden showed up in the world. They weren't. But the point is, and the Celtics couldn't. They were second. They were definitely number two. There was never any doubt about it. However, it flipped. The Celtics were finally able to flip it to at least parity, if not superiority, and to the point where we still have that today, where it's not necessarily hockey over basketball with the way it was 40, 50, 30 years ago. So, no, they flipped it, but they had the town. The Bird, Bird was the equivalent of Orr. Bird for the Orr is obviously the sainted and
sure.
First Bruins history of all, and he captivated the fans and what a special Orr. And Bird did a very similar thing. And isn't it interesting? And I have to point it out that one of the great seminal moments of off the court was when they had the statue commissioned for a Bird down at Armand Lamartine and they had a banquet. I was the MC, and Larry that night revealed a secret which he had never done. Remember, he used to look up at the ceiling, up skyward during the anthem, and he never ever asked. And he announced why he did it. And he did it because he was looking up at Bobby Orr's number 4. And the reason was he wanted people to think about him when he retired the same way they think about Bobby Orr in Boston. Well, sitting at the table along with next to Frank DeFord, who gave me the story, and my mother, Bobby Orr. And when Larry Bird made that announcement, by the way, the Leaf people were here. If you can hear them in the background, that's it. I don't know.
Okay.
Good. When he said that, Frank DeFord said, Bobby Orr went, my God. And he had no idea. None of us had any idea. But Larry announced to the world, and Bobby Orr was able to hear Larry say he wanted him to be him. So they are very parallel in that regard.
I just want you to know, and I know everybody listening or watching feels the same way. The sentence you just said basically describes your life. When Frank DeFord, Bobby Orr, and my mother were sitting next to each other, and I was the MC. I mean, what? Who says that? My mother was sitting next to Bobby Orr, the greatest hockey player of all time, and Frank DeFord, arguably the greatest sports writer of all time, when they were honoring Larry Bird, one of the greatest basketball players of all time. I found that very well. I
must say I never put that in total context.
Well, let me think about it for a minute. Jeez,
I'm very blessed. I've said that a million times that I'm glad I did it when I did it and where I did it and the opportunities and for the right place. The Globe was the perfect place for me.
Oh.
And Boston was a perfect place for me.
So, all right, let's get. I want to bring in the Garnett and the Pierce and the Jaylen Brown and the Jason Tatum. How do you see those teams impacting the city? And obviously they're very popular, and the game has changed, and the game is the way people consume information has changed greatly. But how do you see their
the
role?
thing is that they exploded out of nowhere to win. Remember, the year before that they won the championship in 08, they had a 19-game losing streak. And that team was put together on the fly on draft night when Danny traded number 5 pick to Seattle for Ray Allen.
Ray Allen.
And he already had Pierce, in a prime life, and he had a young point guard ready to show the world who he was in Rajon Rondo. And then he's able to persuade Kevin Garnett to come, who never would have come absent Ray Allen. That's why he was able to get. So he trades with McHale, to Minnesota, and he's got something to offer. He's got Al Jefferson, and I liked that. I thought he was going to be a really, really good player. It never materialized the way we thought it would, but he was an old-fashioned good low-post player. But he had something to offer Danny and Garnett, but Garnett doesn't consent to that trade. If suddenly, and then he made a couple of James Posey and Eddie House picked them up on the. But I'll tell you what, when they made that trade, I went a little bit off the deep end and said, "Yeah, well, big deal. They got 3," and I said, "No team in the league would trade their other 9 guys for the Celtics roster. They got the least impressive roster after those 3 in the league." I said that, and that was before they picked up Posey and House. Okay,
Right.
And I didn't know. I never dreamed that Rondo would get that good that fast as he did that year.
Plus, Perk stepped it up.
Yeah. So, but then they go and they win 66 games, and they had an interesting route to the championship in that during the playoffs, the series got easier as they went along, not harder. Remember how they struggled with Cleveland?
Oh, I know.
A monster play, the other big pickup they made was the famous one was P.J. Brown, who was recruited by the Stars during the All-Star game. Literally recruited him and talked him into coming out of retirement and come play for us. And look, whether he gets himself a ring as a result.
Yeah, he made the big shot.
I don't think they weren't. There's a big difference. I'm building up to. I can't answer that question that there was any specific impact, unlike what's going on right now. Unlike this team, because this team, these defending NBA champions, captivated the city like no Celtic team ever has. Whether it was the Russell teams, the Havlicek teams, the Bird teams, the Garnett teams, no. This reaction last spring to this team was unlike anything that the city has ever seen to the Boston Celtics. I'm telling you right now. The playoff, the atmosphere at the Garden, inside and outside the building, and it's at a peak. Frankly, right now, I think. So this team gets, they've made it happen, and people love to follow. This is almost like a college fan experience that we used to have, which we're never going to have anymore. With watching our team mature from freshmen into sophomores into, we saw this team's ascent, we saw the struggle, we saw the setbacks, we saw the frustration of getting near the top of the mountaintop, but then not scaling it. And then last year they finally scaled the mountaintop and got there. People related to this, I think, and there's a struggle and pulled for these guys in a way. It was almost like a personal thing. This generation is just taken to this team unlike any other generation that's taken to any other Celtic team. I really believe that.
That's great stuff, Bob. And again, we're talking about this because Bill Simmons, Boston guy, is going to have a documentary on the Celtics coming out on HBO in 2025. That was just announced this week. So Bob Ryan just got you warmed up for that. Bob, do you have something left in the tank for a couple other topics?
Well, I just love the idea of LeBron James revealing to the world. Now, the story came out this week that his body maintenance program, his 12-month body maintenance program, cost him about $1.5 million a year. And, between the personal trainer, the chef, and all the stuff he does. But here's among some of the things that he does. Okay. He has cryotherapy, which we will describe as with low temperatures, freezing, and it's to be, all right, cryotherapy. red light therapy, which is a muscle recovery process. And then the one that people can relate to because of hyperbaric chamber.
Yeah.
But that's been around for a long time.
Oh, yeah. J.D. Drew did that, I thought.
Well, he's got one. And his wife,
they all do it. Yeah.
His wife describes it as like he's laying in a coffin. That's where she puts it. Also, of course, those are the three. And he has another thing called I never heard this one, and I looked it up. The Norma Tech leg boots. Are you aware of the Norma Tech leg boots? Well, I saw. If you can go Google it, you can go check it out. They are boots that you wear. They're compression. They serve like it's a compression idea, and like a high tech compression sock, except it's a boot. Okay, he does that. Mm-hmm. And of course, he's very careful about his diet. He's on a high carb, low sugar diet process. Although I'm told he does like to enjoy a glass of Cabernet with this meal. I'm glad to hear that. That's good. Wow. And also, he tries very hard to get 8 to 9 hours sleep, and he's a big proponent of the midday nap. So
I like it.
Well, guess what? It's all working. He's coming, folks. If you have to pay attention this week, he had back-to-back triple doubles this week already, and he's still premier player. You can't, whatever you like him or not like him. Today's not the day to worry about the LeBron haters and all this stuff and what he's like. All I know is he still can play this damn game. Very, 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 very.
A long way from the boys sneaking cigarettes at halftime.
It's absolutely except it wasn't sneaking. It was, and after the game, you go in order with these guys, and JoJo would be lighting it up, and Don Nelson would lighten it up, and that was very, very different world. Very, 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 very
different world. Bob, before I let you go, I have to, your boy, Wembanyama, your guy, Webby, who's an amazing player. He has become, over 82 games, he has become one of 5. Actually, no, he has joined a list of 5. So now he's one of 6.
Okay.
Who have scored 1,700 points, 800 rebounds, 300 assists in his first 82 games. Oscar Robertson.
Yep.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Larry Bird. Can you name the other 2? You're not going to get these. No way.
I'm ready.
Blake Griffin.
Jesus.
You're going to fall off your chair on this one. Sidney Wicks.
Well, he has a distinction too, another distinction. But one of his distinctions is his points per game average deteriorated like 8 straight years.
Oh, right. And then continued to go down when he was a Celtic.
He averaged 24 a game, I think, as a rookie. He was, Now, I have to say this. In college, I was a huge Sidney Wicks fan.
UCLA.
I was present in College Park, Maryland at the NCAA Finals in 1970 when UCLA beat Jacksonville and Artis Gilmore, and Sidney blocked 5 of Gilmore's shots at 6'8". He was one of the handful of, he's a top probably 15 all-time college player. That's saying a lot. He was a great college player. And but he just turned out to be not one of my favorite people, that's for sure. Although the funny story is he's now with the Clippers. And we go out to San Diego, and the game ends. I remember it had a good ending. Anyway, I'm standing in the locker room talking to Randy Smith, who I had known from Buffalo,
Sure, yeah.
And I hear this voice behind me. The voice is saying, "Going to be a murder in here. Going to be a murder in here." And it was Sidney. And the intended victim was yours truly. And so I'm talking. So I said, "Sidney, what's going on?" And he said, among other things, he said, "You ran me out of town." And for once in my life, Gary, and once only in my life, did I come up with the thing to say in time and not 5 hours later. I said, "Sidney, if I thought I had the power, I would have done it sooner."
Good line.
And anyway, so I don't have the finest memory of Sidney Wicks.
Well, no, the Sidney Wicks Curtis Rowe experiment didn't go well.
No, it didn't work out. Tommy Heinsohn was so frustrated with Wicks and his attitude, and he anyway, Sidney Wicks. Wow, but Blake Griffin. Wow, you almost forgot about him, Dr. Dunk, and whoa, that is, you're right. I never would have dreamed. I would have been.
Yeah, those two, I was shocked. The first three, I'm like, yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Speaking of which, you mentioned Kareem. I have to say, this is we speak on the day after Veterans Day, and I will always remember that in 1970, the year I started covering the team, Kareem was a rookie, and he made his Boston debut on November 11th, 1970. I remember that. Yeah. I have to tell you, I forget who won the game, but I think they won, Bucks, I'm pretty sure. But anyway, I remember that date, and I remember I was in the Army Reserves in those days, and I started off that day in a parade in my uniform, and then that night I was working and covered the debut of which, and I remember my game story was all about him. He had a good game. I think they won, and he had a good game. But I remember he went behind his back at mid. Yes, he dribbled behind his back at one point, and I mean, just wow, who's ready for that?
Oh yeah, 7'1" center dribbling behind his back.
Yeah,
I mean, now you're not surprised at all. But
anyway, no. Well, you mentioned you mentioned Victor Wembanyama. It's, and then just last night he made a block that. You just can't imagine. I'm telling you, he's very special. He's very special,
very special player. And from marching in the reserves to hosting a event for Larry Bird with his mom, Frank DeFord, and Bobby Orr, that just blows me away. The way you just said it, Bob, was just so nonchalant. Oh yeah, Frank DeFord, Bobby Orr, and my mom. Like, okay, was there a punchline here?
Well,
Frank DeFord, Bobby Orr, and my mom getting a boat. Boom, boom. I mean,
Well, I got awesome. Frank DeFord is very special to me.
I know he is. Well, he's
my idol.
Yeah, I know.
And I got to meet him my first month on the job, and that was like somebody had arranged it. It was just the way it was great. Anyway, the late Frank DeFord, a truly wonderful guy.
All right, Bob. Brought to you by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. Pick more, pick less with Prize Picks. Bob, you earned your keep today, my friend. See you next time.
Thank you.